Hi, I'm Jack with healthofmyhome.com. Let's continue looking at the thermal shell of the house. That's the cocoon that keeps you warm and comfortable inside. As one comedian said, winters in Minnesota are so severe that you have to put on many layers to stay warm. Thermal shirt, sweater, hoodie, puffy jacket, and the critical layer, a house. From what we've learned in the previous video, we see that all the heat exchange is happening through the outer shell of the box. And therefore, the amount of heat that we lose is not determined by the volume of the box. It's determined by the surface area of the box. That means that if we want to minimize the heat loss, we want to minimize surfaces exposed to the outside. So the shape of the box is really important. 1,000 square foot house can have vastly different heat loss from the 1,000 square foot house next door, even if they are built exactly the same way, but have really different shapes. In theory, the best shape for energy efficiency is a spherical or round house. But in real life, we don't see a lot of them because they're expensive to build and a little out there for most people. So realistically, the best shape we actually see is something closer to a cube. The more together the structure is, the less surface area it has to lose heat. Sprawling houses with intricate shapes and a bunch of additions are inherently less efficient and often have comfort issues. For example, many single-wide mobile homes consume more heat than a 2,000 square foot house. And a big factor is the fact that they're shaped in a way that creates a lot of surface area with pretty small footprint. And when I talk about a shape of the house, I'm not talking about what I see on the outside. I'm talking about the shape of the heated space. Remember the box that we want to air seal and insulate? That box is the thermal box, not the exterior layer that protects from the rain and the elements. They can often be aligned, like most exterior walls, but they also are often quite far apart, like in the case with most attics, where the roof is protecting from the rain, but the thermal boundary is on the attic floor. As an energy auditor, it's one of the most important tasks for me to determine whether something is inside the thermal boundary or outside of it. It means it's either conditioned or not. If it's not conditioned, we don't want to waste our money heating or cooling it. So let's look at common areas that raise questions. Basements. In most cases, basements are part of the heated house. Rarely are there some reasons to dedicate a basement as unconditioned. However, here are the reasons that might make you consider it. If the entrance to it is from the outside and there is no direct connection between the house and the basement, if there are no heating systems or ducts in there, if there is a lot of air pathways between the outside and the basement, if it's not used much, if those conditions are not met, most likely it's a conditioned basement and you don't need to insulate basement ceiling, nor seal the holes in that ceiling, no need to seal or insulate the ducts in the basement either. But you do want to seal and insulate the basement from the outside. Attics. Attics are almost always unconditioned. You want to separate them from the house thermally and not spend any energy on heating or cooling them. There are rare occasions when it makes sense to have the attic be conditioned. Usually we see it in the high-end homes. It costs a ton of money and is usually done if there is a furnace or AC and duct system in there. Making an attic conditioned properly is quite an involved process. I discourage any novice DIYer to even consider a project like that. Attached garages. Garages are pretty much never heated. Some people who might spend a lot of time in their garage might choose to insulate them and then provide a separate source of heat in there. I've seen cases where people decided to heat their garage by adding a branch from their duct system and have the hot air blow into their garage. That's a pretty bad scenario in my book because now all that air has no way to come back to the furnace, which means that the house is just losing all that air and all the heat in it, and is sucking the same amount of air from outside, from all kinds of holes and cracks, and has to reheat it, and also has pressure disbalance. And providing a way for the air from the garage to come back into the house would also not be a good solution, since you don't want any fumes from the garage going into the house. In short, if you absolutely have to heat a garage, do it with a separate dedicated heater. Don't add a duct from your house furnace. Crawl spaces. Those spaces under a house that are usually a couple of feet tall and often have ducts and plumbing, rarely are they conditioned. The only cases you might see them being conditioned is if they're in a new construction or they were retrofitted to be such. Back when most houses in this country were built, making crawl spaces conditioned was not really done. There are some potential energy savings in turning crawl spaces to conditioned if they contain mechanical systems and ducts, but it really requires that work to be done right. Otherwise, it might cause some issues. Sunrooms, enclosed porches, or other out-of-the-ordinary spaces. Some houses just have some funky additions, conversions done to them throughout the years, and those need to be determined individually, ideally by an experienced energy auditor. Things that will affect the decisions are how much those spaces are used, how much are they already heated, homeowner preferences, do they contain heat-producing devices, ducts, mechanical equipment. Those spaces really need some individual attention. So once we determined what we want to condition, we need to come up with a plan on how to make the boundary around the conditioned space airtight and insulated. And the two boundaries that insulate and make surface airtight need to be aligned. They can't be far apart. The layer that doesn't let the air through and insulation need to be together. In fact, insulation should be protected from air moving through it. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. Next, we'll look at common typical types of houses, their advantages, and some weak spots they have. This was Jack with healthofmyhome.com. Thank you for watching.